short it out.
All right. So, good afternoon or evening, everybody. I'm excited to talk about Theory U and you. And Theory U is a really intriguing concept, more of a methodology and a thought process that we could apply to our leadership models than a model of leadership itself. And there's going to be a lot of mountain imagery, so talk over that. We're going to go through tonight an overview of what Theory U is. I'm going to walk us all through the process of how to get from here to here, and then also show some of the applications for this means of thinking and a teachable point of view for you to all take your separate ways. So, an overview of Theory U. It's, as I said, a change management system that was developed by Otto Scharmer, who was born in 1961, and he founded this in 1997, and then proceeded to put out a book that was first published in 2007, and also created an institute where he sort of practices this methodology. And Theory U is a result of different kinds of interviews and conversations that he held, approximately 150 conversations at MIT with all sorts of entrepreneurs and creative thinkers to get a sense of what works and what doesn't, and try to find patterns that emerge that led to Theory U. And it ended with this concept of leading from the emerging future. Now, what does that mean? If I was going to walk from here to the doorway, before I take my first step, I'm envisioning the process of actually walking through the door. So it's extrapolating that, right? So as you go into strategic planning at work or any kind of new endeavor, it's thinking with the end in mind. It's leading from an emerging future. And it's also moving from the ego to the eco. So moving away from yourself and the ways of thinking that you might have any preconceived notions that may be in your head, and going to thinking about the whole. So it's a larger awareness so that you could actually change the systems that you work in. And as you do any kind of reading with Theory U, we see this diagram quite a lot. And so this is where we get the U shape for all our Sesame Street viewers at home. And the idea is coming down a mountain from where your own perspectives are, kind of getting a clean slate at the bottom and being able to move up towards your group community. And so the steps that are involved in doing that is examining a situation without judgment. So as I mentioned before, getting rid of those preconceived notions and really taking a moment to do some active listening and learning from others, and trying to really assess where people are coming from and opening yourself up to empathy. From there, we get to that bottom of the mountain to determine the core of the issue. What am I doing here? Where am I in place of all these other people around me? And then we start to move back up, where we brainstorm new insights, new ideas emerge. We're kind of letting the universe speak to us and inspire us in new ways. And then you're testing it out. You're experimenting, you're implementing based on the process that you've just gone through, this whole travel through the U. And it gets you to a couple places. Again, as I mentioned, if I want to walk from here to the door, we're talking about moving from the past through to our future. We're also talking about downloading information and then being able to respond to that and performing that outward. And it's also a movement from, as I mentioned before, that ecosystem to the ecosystem. So as we walk through this a little bit, I'm going to go in depth into each one of those steps. And I like to connect it to some different colloquialisms that we've gathered up throughout the class, as well as from my family. But to walk through, as I said, we have these 5 basic steps, which take the user from past patterns to a place where they're operating from the whole. And as you go down and up, there's also 3 different segments that the users travel through, different kinds of consciousness that I'll talk to you about as well. Ultimately, the goal with doing all of this is to remove yourself from blind spots. So often we have preconceived notions, things that we just can't get out of our head, and we're trying to move past that and breaking down these barriers to empathy, trying to get that more holistic view where we're understanding where people are coming from. So I'll walk you through, we're sort of at the top left here, and as we move down, we have observing, and these are the definitions that were brought up by the founders of theory. So observing, sensing, presencing, crystallizing, and prototyping. So those are the 5 main steps, and we'll break each one of them down. So observing is examining a situation without judgment, mind wide open, really trying to find out how processes function, and what my mom used to always say when we'd go to a museum, look with your eyes, not with your hands. So you're really just trying to, you put them back here and try to get a sense of where you're at. So then as we move down to sensing, it's learning from others through that active listening like I mentioned before. Looking with your heart to see where things are interconnecting. You're just sort of looking out and getting that broader picture. You see how people's roles and responsibilities can affect and shape an organization, and you're really trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. Now when we get to the bottom, that's kind of a, they never said this in any of the readings, but I couldn't help but think of the concept of hitting rock bottom. That has really negative connotations, but I like it because it talks about, like, there's nowhere to go but up, and there's, it's kind of that moment of realization of where you need to go next. So that's where we're at with presencing. So it's determining the true core of an issue. You're at that baseline where you can begin to take action, and now you're open to the inspiration and knowledge that you need to make these new decisions with your blinders off. And again, like I mentioned before, it kind of goes back to Covey of thinking with the end in mind. So as we move up to crystallizing, this is really when we begin to brainstorm new ideas. We answer the questions, what ethos do we want for our future? We're accessing the power of intention, and we're trying to picture that future out the door, right? And then prototyping, putting it into place, trying to work through these actions and experimenting, integrating all these different elements with your head, your hands, and your heart, embodying the future that we know is possible. And again, I think of Casablanca, we'll always have Paris, right? So you've had this whole journey in your head, but you're moving forward, onwards and upwards. So again, as I mentioned, we also have these 3 phases. As you walk down and back up, keeping an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. I was surprised as I was doing research for Theory U, there were a lot of diagrams. The founder actually loves to doodle and PowerPoint, and it ends with his lectures having all sorts of incomprehensible scribble on the board. But I did find this drawing that I liked a lot, how the open mind, open heart, open will brings these 3 sort of pillars of curiosity, compassion, and courage. Letting go to let through, or letting go to let come as you go through that you. So how do we apply this? Where are ways that we can kind of see Theory U in action? Because of its roots at MIT, it has really strong roots in business, science, and society. But they've also talked about its importance in policymaking and government, because those are such system-based organizations where there's years and years of bureaucracy that can sometimes impede progress. So Theory U is a great way to break down barriers there. It can also work with strategic planning and looking ahead in whatever organization you're in. Shelby and I right now in marketing here at Daemen, we're trying to put a strategic plan together. And as I was drawing out these U's, I kept thinking about how that might apply to our work here. And another thing that I read at one point was taking on and breaking down the systems that are working the people, because the people need to work the system. It has to work for them as opposed to the other way around, because otherwise you're not making progress. So a number of other places where theory can come in handy. As I mentioned, higher ed, lots of systems and silos in higher ed, as well as the healthcare system. I found a group, I should have written down what their name was, but there was a counseling group online that I found that really recommends for couples counseling using Theory U and going through that process with your partner. And then advertising, being able to have a client come in and share where they want to go. Again, I saw a lot of similarities of our process of intaking a client and trying to lead them on their way of going above and beyond. I also, as I mentioned, lots of mountain imagery. And as I was going through this, I know we've had some really great connections. Paula had great significant historical leaders, of course, TJ with Martin Luther King. I couldn't help but think of the Grinch and his travel down a mountain and then back up. And he really does go through the processes outlined in Theory U, the observing of Whoville, and really getting a sense of who they are, where they're coming from. He comes down to their level and really is able to take in what this Christmas thing is all about, crystallizing and being able to understand the power and the magic associated with the holiday in terms of this book, and then prototyping and taking it all the way into becoming, one of the favorite sons of Whoville. So. I was probably staring at too much mountain imagery, but I couldn't help but think of his travel there. That silliness aside, what can we take away from Theory U? This key of empathy being an effective lens with which we can observe our future. I think there's so often a negative connotation with some of these soft words, empathy, curiosity, compassion. I'd like to take the Mr. Rogers approach with all of those and really show the strength that can be wielded from that. Again, understanding that systems can be difficult barriers to overcome, but they are not insurmountable. And never stop listening and keeping our three eyes open, because those are all parts of the toolkit of being a leader. So that is Theory U. Any questions? Happy to talk about Dr. Seuss for the rest of the night.
Can you go back to that last slide?
Yeah, of course.
What you said about empathy is a connected lens with which to observe the region. Oh, I thought that was good.
Yeah, ego to eco. I had to
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I had to write that down and put that in the bag. That's intense. Very true though.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm curious, if it's okay to even ask you, Cameron, when you're in your puppetry world, do you think you've ever used parts of Theory U in the creation of your creative product?
Yeah, because I think it's funny. I see a lot of similarities between puppetry and stand-up comedy, because it's a lot of putting out the pieces of the car out on the lawn so you could see how they all work, and then putting it back together in a way that no one's ever seen it before. It's a lot of work with visual metaphors and how an idea, whether you're bringing a teddy bear to life or bringing a rocking horse to life, like all these different things that we can imbue with life and thought and character. What could that represent to an audience beyond just it being a teddy bear or a rocking horse or what have you? So I do think there is that thought process of what does it mean to me, what does it mean for other people, I think about actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because when I was an emerging artist at the O'Neill Theater Center a number of years ago, I was working on a play that was about being a patient in the hospital, and I was trying to create a nonverbal object puppetry piece. So it was, obviously we know the nonverbal component of that, but it was using a teddy bear and a blanket and hospital socks and other sort of ephemera from a hospital bedroom to tell different kinds of myths and stories that could aid and comfort patients who are in hospital rooms. And part of our soundscape was using I wanted to use the heart monitor as sort of a metronome to just kind of create an atmosphere. And when the piece was over and the heart monitor stopped beeping because the piece was over, a number of people thought that the character had died, not that the piece had ended. And we had to kind of stop and assess and realize what the icons that we thought, what we thought the icons were saying were not the same as what the icons were saying to the people in the audience, and how did we need to adjust and get in their shoes, understand where they were coming from, and then work backwards to make sure that I could say that thing while also honoring what those other people were saying. So it's that back and forth conversation with the audience. So, Theory U is definitely applicable and important as you're doing any of this kind of stuff. Thank you.